Hello there. You know what time it is? It's time to calibrate, and this is episode 41. I'm Mark Levesque. Joining me as usual are my co-hosts Bob Allaby and Brent Robillard. Today we have a very special guest, James Crichton. No relation to Michael, or at least I don't think so. He is one of the hosts of the very popular Form and Function podcast, which we're big fans of. Though I must admit, it is the first time I've ever heard his voice without it being sped up to 1.2 times speed. So he sounds a little strange to me, but I guess to you guys, if you don't listen to your podcast quickly, you'll sound fine. Welcome to the show, James.
Hello. Thank you. The preference, I think, is put me on about 20% volume and then speed me up to about 3 times. And that's the best way to deal with my voice. I think just fire away and you're all done and all good.
So per the laws of watch podcasting, we must begin with the wrist check. But since we've got James on and his world revolves around EDC, how about we do a pocket dump EDC check kind of thing? So since you're the guest of honor, how about you go first, James?
Well, I will start with my wrist. I guess I'm wearing a Corona Tokyo calendar one in the kind of green olive dial version.
Nice.
Which I haven't worn this. I've worn this once since January, since the beginning of the year. We've started, Ken and I and a few others have started kind of keeping track of what watches we're wearing. So for first time ever, I have an actual kind of identifiable number of times I've worn each watch. So this one was looking a little bit sorry for itself, so I popped it on this morning. But gear-wise, so I'll tell you this, I'm recording this in my office in Bath in the UK, and I am surrounded by, I won't exaggerate when I say probably about 100 Swiss Army knives. So I don't think kind of a pocket, I don't have anything in my pockets, but I have a lot of gear nearby. So I can, if you like, I can pick some bits that I would if I was going to get up and walk out of the room.
Yeah, if you're about to leave the house, what's going in your pocket?
So the knife is a fairly new one for me, but it's a giant mouse knife with titanium scales. It's called the Farley. It's a little. I'm going to try and avoid the clicking because I know how hard it is to edit it out sometimes.
No, that's fine.
It's I guess it's the slip joint knife, kind of UK friendly, fairly small blade. Most significantly for me, it the whole of the blade is kind of held within its own space, so it slips into a pocket perfectly. And then flashlight, my absolute favorite flashlight brand is a brand called CWF or Charles Wiggins flashlight. And this is their little micro click in a kind of zirconium blackened coating. And then pens, I could never choose one pen. I think one is, the EDC world gets a little bit caught up in the idea of two is one and 3 is a million and just all the various numbers you should be carrying of everything. But pens is the one thing that I often carry 2 on. And at the moment it would be my latest darling is a tactile turn. I think it's called the side click. No, maybe it's not side click. It is maybe just the click, but it's in they did just before the end of the year, they did a run of, I guess, kind of oddities. So strange finishes, funny designs for the barrel, strange different colors from their usual. And this was one of the kind of more demure options. It's a better way to grab it, but essentially it's a sort of pale,
like a
blue,
bolt click kind of thing.
It kind of is. It's listeners of my podcast will know I'm mildly obsessed by this, but essentially it's like a switch, like a rocker switch.
Yeah.
It makes the most addictive sound. So it's kind of it's a new thing, fairly new for them. I think
it looks satisfying.
It's incredibly. I mean, it's insanely so. I wouldn't recommend this pen because you will be driving everybody around you. It is just so clicky. It's a proper. The EDC world loves its fidget stuff, and I would say this is a pen/fidget toy.
Very cool.
That would be my core gear that I would take with me if I was to get up and walk out.
Perfect. How about you, Brent?
Well, this morning actually, and I'm going to have to apologize in advance because I don't know the actual name of this model, but this is a watch from Precitus that just showed up. And I was doing a photo shoot with it outside and inside early this morning. And so I decided to leave it on. It's, Mark, you'd be stunned. It's 34 millimeters. It is very small.
It doesn't look small.
It doesn't even feel small. And I was editing some photos. I'm sorry, I was kind of being rude before we started this podcast. And I was looking down at my phone, but I was doing some last minute editing, and I looked at it on my wrist and I thought that doesn't really look like 34 millimeters. But it's a mecha quartz movement, and I really do think it's kind of cool. The strap is a
Mecha
bit
quartz,
long.
a kinetic,
Yeah.
like it's a quartz with a winder.
Yes. So
Oh,
it's
cool.
interesting. I've never really had this kind of thing on before, but it is really nice. I like the finish. The strap is a little long, and I think it'll take some doing to wear it in, but still, I think it's pretty appropriate for the sort of military styling. I think they call it something like the Arctic Field. So I don't want to get that wrong, but I think that's what it is. So that's what I got on this morning. And in terms of sort of pocket stuff, well, I laid it out on the table here. This is the knife that I pretty much carry everywhere in my coat. And I don't even think you can buy them anymore because it's from RZE, so it's titanium scales, titanium blade, etc. And I think when they were
Titanium blade
this, yeah. So I broke it a
or
little bit.
titanium coated,
You
maybe.
see that? Yeah, titanium coated. You can see there, and I did the thing you shouldn't do, and I used it as a pry bar one day. But I just love it so much because of its size, that I almost forget that it's in my pocket, and super super light. Love it. But you can't get it anymore because when they were launching it, I think somebody in a factory somewhere stole the design and then began releasing them, in some kind of like no name kind of thing. So it just ruined everything for their launch or whatever. But I really love this a lot. And then this thing shows up in a lot of my photography on Instagram, but it's the James Brand carabiner. So this I'll sometimes throw the keys on this and that sort of thing. So that's what I have there. And then for a pen, this is my favorite pen actually, and this has nothing to do with the ink or what's on the inside. It's the weight of it. It's the stainless steel. It's from Bastion, and this one is actually a full bolt action that's right there. It turns up in a lot of the photography too, just because it's quite photogenic. But my favorite thing is I was in a school yesterday and I was helping some kids with some stuff, and one of the educational assistants came by and said, "Oh, can I borrow your pen?" And she picked it up and she went, "Oh, wow, does it feel great?" She says, "This is the kind of pen you just, if you pick it up in an office, you just slip it in your pocket and walk out with it." So it's a really, really cool pen. But I also brought along this wallet. This is, James, you don't know Caroline necessarily, my wife, but these guys do. Caroline makes leather goods. And one of the things that she does are these sort of like EDC wallets and you can either carry your passport in there or your field notes. My field notes get used a lot. You can see the cover came off them, but I really like this wallet because it carries all the cards you need. It has this thing for, taking notes and things like that, which I do all the time. So yeah, that's pretty much what I got there for a regular carry. What about you, Bob?
So I also like clicky things like you, James. I have on the Lumiere from Christopher Ward. Mark and I are actually collaborating on an article on the watch. He's doing the writing, myself the photos, but it's got a really nice clicky action, very addictive. Pocket knife. I always have a pocket knife. I'm like you, James. I drive a truck, and I have most of my what I call my carry sort of in the truck instead of in the pocket. But I always have a knife in my pocket, and today I have the CRKT Kiss, just an affordable knife, but I've had this for about a decade. Neat design, and good to have around for unboxing things, that sort of thing, Amazon deliveries. And yeah. What about you, Mark?
So lately I've been wearing my Fortis Novenaut a lot, but I changed it up. Today I'm wearing the Isotope Moonshot. It's back from a reviewer, which should have the article up today, hopefully, and that being James Stacy from Hodinkee. And I've been absent with this watch for probably since October. I don't know. It's been a while. So I've missed it, and it's great to have it back on wrist. As for the gear, so I also carry a pocket knife all the time. And there was a time, maybe a decade ago or 10, 15 years ago, where the watch hobby started getting out of hand, where it's just too many watches, spending a lot of money. And I figured I'd try something else and maybe curb that, spending a lot of money. And of course, I picked knives because I've always liked pocket knives and stuff. And lo and behold, that got expensive pretty quick too. And so I'd acquired a bunch of knives and I got rid of a lot of them. So the one that I kept over the years was this one here. It's a DPX Heat. So it's just under, I think, 2.5 inches for the blade. So I like little blades, but it is very stocky. And it's LMAX steel. It's very, very sharp. It handles well. It's got a titanium scale on one side, G10 on the other. It's very sturdy, very solid. I love this blade. Only problem is I had it sharpened, and the dum dum who sharpened it got rid of the tip. He sort of rounded the tip. I'm very upset about that. I mean, it's very sharp, but it's just very upset about that. Cool thing also about most of the DPX knives, they have a bottle cap opener on the end of the blade that always comes in handy for Heinekens and Coronas in the summer. So yeah, so that's great. It also has a glass break tip, carbide tip on the end, and a no, this one doesn't have it. I had another one called the Hex, I think. It had a wrench built on the handle. This one just has a lanyard hold. So I've got that going. I've got a challenge coin that I sometimes carry. It's the one that our friend Sean Bush from Bush Outdoors gave us at um, the marathon evening on last timepiece show. I think Ken went to that.
Yep.
James, if ever you're coming to Vancouver, correct?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
there's likely going to be a marathon event at
Usually on the
probably
Sunday.
on the Sunday after the show. So if you run to Sean, he'll probably give you one. Super nice dude. And what's really cool about this coin is that they actually glows. There's luminant on the dial. If you've got one, Brent or Bob, go check it out. I was lighting up something else, and it was nearby. And I closed the lights, and the coin lit up. I'm like, oh wow, cool. So I got that. And as far as wallets are concerned, I got this. It's like a rigid type wallet thing. I used to carry a leather type wallet in my back pocket, and it's just like George Costanza and Seinfeld. It's just getting bigger, and you're sitting lopsided, and it's never comfortable. And then I wound up getting this. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I can't go back to having a regular wallet. This sits in the front pocket, and it's nice and lean, and it's got everything I need in it, and nothing more. I love it. So that's my pocket dump, or yeah, so pocket knife. It's either this or I have a Spyderco cue ball, which is a very weird knife with a straight blade. It's very strange. So it's this or the other one that I carry all the time. So that's pretty much it. So we usually do a bit of a bio on our guests. So for people who are not familiar with James, James Crichton is a UK-based gear enthusiast, EDC aficionado, and co-host of the Form and Function podcast, a weekly show that explores everyday carry, watches, tech, and lifestyle gear with curiosity and depth. He's known on the online community as at Gear Etal. Am I saying that right? How do you say that? Is Gear Etal?
Yep.
On Instagram, where he shares thoughtful gear photography and insights on his favorite everyday carry pieces and watches. James combines his passion for design, functionality, and storytelling to break down how great gear fits into real life. And he's built a strong following of like-minded creatives and collectors who enjoy his take on horology, carry items, and broader gear culture. Outside of podcasting, James has been featured in community EDC pieces and interviews, highlighting his diverse interests, ranging from knives and watches to cameras, outdoor gear, and everyday tech, giving listeners and followers a personal look at his carry philosophy and lifestyle. Normally, our guests' bios are a little longer, but frankly, beyond his show and your Instagram page, I couldn't find much about you, not even a LinkedIn page. Is that on purpose? Are you hiding from the Rosers?
I'd love it if I was mysterious. I'm probably one of the least mysterious people you'll ever meet in person, but no, not really. I think I've always kind of struggled a little bit with the idea of like an online personality and yet being a kind of quite enjoying the creative side of it. And I think I've kind of shied away a bit from having my face at the front of any kind of sort of Instagrammy style brand, should we say. And as a result, I guess I've just not, there aren't many pictures of my face out there, and I'm not into, I don't like Facebook, and I kind of,
neither do I.
other than Instagram, I don't really use any other social media. So it kind of, I guess luck, not judgment.
So can you tell us a bit about your background? Maybe how you got into the space, perhaps what you do for a living?
So what I do for a living is a long story, as is everything I tend to say. I guess I'm a property developer, or kind of that's a grand name for what I do, I guess.
Real estate mogul.
Renovate. Exactly. I'm like a British Trump. Not really. Obviously, that's a bad joke, maybe. But I'm safe from
It's okay. We're Canadian.
that.
We can make fun of them.
Um, but yeah, no, it's very small scale. It's more kind of renovation than anything. I love old buildings. I love kind of the architecture and design, and turning bringing a space that is a bit unloved back to being a great home for somebody. So it's very small scale, usually one at a time. That is a kind of a core part of, I guess, my job. But other than that, I run a couple of sort of small product developing businesses and various bits and pieces other than that, but nothing to shout about as that's going to sort of define me, if that makes sense. Um, I live in Bath in the UK, or in England in the UK, which is in the sort of southwest of the country. Is a lot of people. Bath is a strange place. It's not big. There's about 90,000 people here, but it has 6+ million tourists a year. So it seems to be a place that lots of people have heard of, and certainly a surprising number of people have visited. So it's always fun to share that. But other than that, I guess I'm British, obviously, as you can tell by my um, very uh, British accent, I guess. um, and yeah, I guess that's really much me. I suppose I have a family. I have a 4-year-old son, and a 12-year-old black lab, and a wife, obviously. But yeah, that's about it. So I'm still keeping it brief because still don't want too much out there on the internet.
I had actually heard, James, that you were in the renovation and property development business. I'm not sure where I read that, but it might have been an interview done about 4 or 5 years ago with an EDC community thing. And to me, when I read that, I thought, man, that's a job that just screams out for everyday carry. Somebody who's in a building and doing renovation, et cetera. So I'm just curious, like, what came first for you? Would you fall into EDC after that job? Was it form before function, function before form, or what actually got you down that rabbit hole that were you already there?
I think I was already there. So I've been doing the property stuff kind of on and off probably for 12, 13 years now. And before then I worked in the city in London. So in a sense, there was no real, and there was certainly no real call for hard use gear in that.
Hmm.
And certainly wearing suits and coming in and out of buildings meant you probably couldn't really carry anything. And London is not a place where you wouldn't carry a knife, right?
Okay,
Especially these
that's
days.
interesting.
Though we have quite strict knife laws in the UK, and which is why often the knife choices of UK EDCs is quite limited. It has to be a slip joint, for example. It can't have any
Hmm.
kind of lock. And it has
Okay.
to be, I think, under 3 inches in kind of length. But yeah, I can't remember the original question, as I've confused myself as I usually
Yeah.
do. But
How did you get there? How did you
how did
fall
I get
into this? Yeah.
Um, I I think actually the Swiss Army knife thing was probably my entrance to see about. I've had pen knives as long as I can remember. My grandmother had a very peculiar, now rare pen knife in her handbag, and I can remember digging it out whenever I'd go and visit her to kind of play with it. And my father had Swiss Army knives and that kind of thing, and I think that led me into the world of small batch. Once upon a time, Victorinox, the brand that make most pen
Mhm.
knives, they used to make these limited runs of an aluminium scaled Swiss Army knife. They still make them, just not in this breadth of color they used to. And I got into, funny enough, actually buying from a company in Canada, of all places, to get them into the UK. They were sold in the US, but they wouldn't export them. It was only buying in Canada that you could get them. And I think that got me deep into a segment of the EDC community.
Mhm.
And I've always loved things like photography and gear, and the combinations of the two, of loving these knives, them becoming relatively rare, and certainly there was a strong community on Instagram related to that. And my enjoyment of learning to take photographs. In this case, we're talking about quite a long time ago, so learning to take digital photographs as opposed to
Right.
35 mil, etc. And that just developed into gradually photographing the other bits and pieces and getting to know people, and people quite quickly started offering to send me things to try and all that sort of stuff. And it sort of snowballed into the insanity that is DC world today. And like a lot of things, the COVID changed a lot, I think, for a lot of
Mhm.
watch world and the EDC world, and certainly from a community point of view, exploded. And I think that that's the point at which I decided that my love of watches should also be included in my kind of love of gear. But
Well, this next question comes from a guy who owns far too many watches, so there's no judgment here. But you have already intimated that you're sitting in a room surrounded by hundreds of Swiss Army knives, and I read somewhere that you owned, or maybe do own, 140 such knives. So is that true? And tell me, what's the fascination particularly with that brand? Because the EDC world is full of knives. What is it about that?
I know. It's a little magnifying glass that pops out.
Yeah.
sadly, I think I only have one Swiss Army knife that has that. That's a kind of proper tool Swiss Army knife. The Alloc stuff tends to be a bit more stripped back, and therefore it's actually less useful, and therefore it's very much a form thing. Those scales. I guess I don't have 140 anymore. I took. It's going to sound very strange, but I took advantage of them becoming very rare and incredibly relatively valuable, and kind of cashed in to a chunk of my collection. Maybe like 40 plus knives, maybe a bit more than that, maybe 50 plus knives were sold. And it's going to sound even stranger, were sold by a specialist guy in Switzerland. Well, actually, I think he lives in Austria now, but for me, to collectors all around the world. It's crazy to say it, but and that reduced the collection. And I don't really add to it very often, not from a Swiss Army knife point of view. In regards to the brand, I don't have any particular loyalty to Victorinox or hold them in any particularly high esteem. They make a fantastic product for not too much money, and I think that's something to be kind of applauded. And there's a wonderful joy in finding things that have that perfect thing of they're not particularly expensive, they're very good at doing the task they're meant to do, and they're kind of fun and nice looking at the same time. It is a form meets function to a degree, and I think that's always attracted me with all sorts of different gear. I'd love to say there was some kind of wonderful story as to why Victorinox or something like that. And as try as I might, they won't send me any stuff for free. It's very upsetting. But yeah.
Speaking of form and function, what drew you to start that show with Ken and Philip? How did you guys meet? Also, was it the gear, the conversations, or was it something else that sped this up?
Good question. I think so. The idea was effectively mine, I think, but I was at a red bar with Ken, as in not with him, but at the same red bar as Ken, Red Bar Bristol, and I just floated it as an idea. I'm far too I hate the sound of my voice as an editor, but I will happily talk for hours on very little, and Ken likewise shared a lot of the same kind of love for design and objects and watches, and pen knives and pens and things that people have put deliberate time and effort into details relating to. And we just, we got on so well that we thought, let's give it a go. And we thought to ourselves, well, who can we bring on with us? And a friend of mine at the time, Philip, who was also in Red Bar Bristol, was a great choice because he adds a sort of added another sort of spectrum to our droplet. But yeah, we had no real plan when we set out. It was more a question of let's see how it goes and let's talk about things we love and see if it sticks. And we
It wasn't at the red bar. You didn't just float the idea to the entire group saying, "Hey, I want to start a podcast." Who's in? And then you drew straws.
maybe that would have worked out better. I'm not sure I would have made the cut if I'd done that. But yeah, it's fun enough. Red Bar Bristol is a wealth of wonderfully creative people too. But no, I think the as you guys will know, the biggest challenge with doing a podcast is doing it regularly and getting people on to record and at a regular time, weekly or in your case, kind of every 2 weeks. That's a real challenge, and therefore that's going to limit who you can choose. It needs to be someone who can be reliable. That's why Philip doesn't do it anymore. We didn't boot him out. Obviously, we'd love him to come back whenever he's ready, but just life got too hectic, and he couldn't find a time that he could reliably say, "Yeah, I can do that time." Which Ken and I have relatively busy lives, and having a set time every week that we record has been a useful way of keeping that consistency. But yeah.
Yeah, we decided to do a every 2 weeks show. And
Very sensible.
initially I wanted to do every week, and then quickly realized that it's too much work to do weekly for us with our our lives. So how do you decide what makes a good topic for each episode?
Oh, wow. I mean, 120 episodes in, and I'm not sure we've done a good topic yet. But
I disagree.
yeah, it's in the beginning, it was very much like a desire to kind of explain this peculiar these worlds, these communities that we were all involved in, or kind of in and out involved in. And it was a desire to perhaps explain a bit of that. So, I think we did an episode on what is EDC, and then we had a few guests on and kind of to talk a bit more about that, and what's this silly thing about watch collecting? What's this watch community thing? They're kind of just trying to explain a bit to non people, non kind of down the rabbit hole people. But we
Muggles.
quickly, yeah, muggles, yeah. We quickly realized that actually that's not who talking to. More of us talking to people who, we're not really explaining anything. We're just talking about things that most of our listeners will already have a bit of an idea about. Or frankly, we all have the access to the internet in our phones immediately. So, people can just hop on and have a quick look, and then suddenly they get it because of all the other things they're into. So I think once we'd realized that, the format process changed, and we a bit of Ken and I generally chat about stuff all the time, sort of off air, and be it messaging or kind of talking, and every now and again we go, oh, that would be a great topic, or that kind of thing. But more recently, we just walk up and talk stuff. I'd love to say it has more direction than that, but that's all it is.
I was going to ask you a question kind of related to that, but as we're sitting here talking, I think I realized that we've met in person before. The first time I ever met Ken was at the British Watchmakers Day. He did an event with Worn and Wound at a small pub. Were you there?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah,
I had a full
Good
tilt
memory.
conversation with you.
I apologize then.
Well, there was the alcohol was free flowing a little bit, so you may not recall, and it's a little fuzzy for me too. But it just dawned on me now that we've actually met in person before. So, yeah, it's interesting to talk to people and how they approach podcasts. We had Andrew McCutcheon on last year, and he was talking about effing time and how planned out that was, right down to specific viral moments they wanted to hit. Do you guys have like bullet points to sort of rein it back in if you go off the rails at all, or just kind of wing it?
Absolutely wing it. I think there's yeah, it does seem that the thing that resonates with people is just it's two guys who love these things, these peculiar things, and who just love talking about it, love chatting about it. It's a conversation amongst. It's kind of hopefully the conversation that that we might have had in a pub at an event, or you might have with your mates about things who are into, with the advantage of being they're into the same thing that you are. I think that's kind of where we are now. We still plan, we still have guests on every now and again, and we still plan to do more specific ones, but for now, certainly it's a more relaxed. Yeah, see what happens.
Cool.
Yeah, I recently described your podcast as TGN with a British accent.
Someone did, or I hope
I
we
did.
didn't.
I did.
You did. Okay. Oh,
I
good.
did on
Okay.
another show, and then we
Um,
talked about popping crowns in his Tale of Two Wristies, and his podcast is like TGN but with a British and an American accent. But,
that's huge. That's a huge accolade. In which case, and we love the pair at Popping Grounds too.
yeah,
I've
great
met
people,
up
good friends of ours.
with Aman over here too. Yeah, I mean, TGN, I'm a huge TGN fan. There's absolutely no way I could ever say a lot of the way I see watches and the way I see things like collecting and being a person in those communities. It's very much driven by, how those two have kind of have made it look. There are ways to behave in the world, and sometimes you need people to guide you a little bit. And the watch world is such a kind of varied place of people, and you find your kind of people of sorts. And I think the TGN kind of the wider TGN sphere is very much, Ken and I feel very at home amongst them. And we had a slightly strange experience fairly recently on the TGN Slack. So I'm not a big Slack user, and Ken is sort of on and off. But we had someone asked the question of, essentially, I think they said something like, "I know who Ken is on this Form and Function podcast, but I've no idea who the others are." And it was lovely to see lots of other people chiming in and kind of explaining a little bit who we are, kind of almost realizing that other people, other TGNers are also, enjoying what we're doing, and kind of see it as adjacent. So it's, hugely flattering, but a strange experience nonetheless, having someone ask a question about you in a forum for something. I might be listening to TGN probably for maybe 8 years, maybe 7 years, something like that. But it's, yeah, a wonderful comparison. I'll take it. And I have a clap.
So we talk about grails in the watch world when it comes to the very hard to get or even unobtainable watches. You guys do have occasional guests on. Is there any grail guest you'd love to have on the channel
Ooh,
or on the podcast?
I, I, I have a strange trait that I'm not this is going to sound very strange, but I'm not a kind of um a, a celeb hunter. Is that a weird way of expressing it? As I don't tend to value people by what they do. It's more a case of like who they are and
Mhm.
how they portray themselves. And that somewhat affects some of the choices we've made in regards to guests and that sort of stuff. We have a great example being the Worn Around team. Mark, they are such a lovely bunch that, frankly, I want all of them to come on. And we've had a couple so far, and hopefully we'll line up others. But it's I don't know, it's a tricky thing to kind of talk about openly, as in, how do you choose a person as such to chat to? And because we, in a sense, at this point, haven't really been kind of chasing necessarily um, getting listeners through our guests, which I think
Mhm.
is probably very silly of us. So therefore, we haven't really had that conversation. But I think Ken and I have started having that conversation. I know for me, on the EDC side, there's a chap who I've known for a very, very long time. His EDC handle is Notorious EDC. He's Tom Medvedich. It's his real name, and he's frankly a stalwart in the photography community, EDC wise, and he's a stalwart in the EDC world. He makes products now. He has knives and various kind of EDC related paraphernalia that he produces. He would be fantastic. I mean, he agreed to, I think, in like week 3. We just haven't made it happen. I think we have, don't know, who else? If we could go with like imaginary things, or indeed, actually maybe less imaginary. I'll tell you what, Justin Hast. Again, the gerbil in my head finally caught up. Be a lovely guy, I think, to get on the podcast. I think I'd love to know a bit more about. He has lots of content out there, and he's a master at the production of content. But I'd love to know a bit more about the other stuff he carries. Ken and I have talked about this thing of, if we get guests on, like, should we maybe have like a a sort of standard pro forma of like we talk to every guest about the same thing to try and create some sort of repetition there. And the thing that I would like to do is have this almost like, what's in your bag thing, where people kind of unload. What are the things you carry? What's on your feet? Almost like talk me head to toe through your chosen gear. That sort of idea.
Please disrobe.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's, I think the on many levels, I think Justin has to be fantastic for that. I'd love to know what other thing, because there's no doubt he's going to be into other stuff. He's going to be, he's going to have a lot to say about his choice of shirt brand, or he's going to have a lot to say about what socks he's. I know that sounds kind of boring, but I love all that stuff. I think that's just the whole picture of people, especially people like him who are in the sort of watch community, certainly in the British watch community, in the sort of forefront of it. But yeah, other than that, there are the celebrities sort of thing. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. What about you guys? Do you have? I'm going to turn it back at you and say, do you have any particular guests?
Well, we got you on today.
Exactly.
Way to go, Brent.
This is the last episode. We don't need to go any further.
I lined that up. I made that too easy, didn't I?
In all seriousness, we talk about to each other about who we want as guests, and like you said before, we realize that we're talking to a bunch of nerds like us. And I've been wanting to branch out and get guests that are adjacent to our sphere, like someone that's somewhat into watches and has other things in their lives that are important that we can talk about. I was talking about getting, if possible, Geddy Lee from Rush, because he's an avid watch collector and he's a friend of a friend, and he's Canadian, and that would be a great guest. And I just recently listened to a Stuff You Should Know podcast. I don't know if you ever heard of Stuff You Should Know. It's probably one of the biggest podcasts in the world. And maybe not Joe Rogan. So underneath Joe Rogan is there's Stuff You Should Know. And they did an episode on time a couple of weeks ago, explaining the beginning of time, starting with the what do you call it? Not an abacus. The thing with the thing, whatever, with the sun.
Sundial.
But no, there's a name for it though. They had a name for it.
Yeah, there is.
Gnomon.
Yeah.
But anyways, so they start with that, and then turns out that one of the hosts, he's a watch collector. He had a Lumtech on, which is a pretty obscure brand for So I reached out to him saying, and he apparently is coming to Montreal to do a live show. So I've slid into his DMs, and I'm trying to get him to come on. That would be great because their reach is enormous. I think they get over 1 million plus downloads per episode. It's huge. It's a huge show, and they're just great guys. I'm going to say this, might flatter you or not, but it's like Form and Function. It's just two dudes that pick a subject and explain the crap out of it every episode in a way that's just friendly, open, and they make mistakes sometimes and they get corrections and they're open to being corrected, and they're just great guys. And so if he can come on the show, that would be great. So that for me is, of course, is the aspirational Jean-Claude Bivet, which I'd love to have on, and guys like that. But right now we've been very fortunate to have incredible guests over the last year, from Robert Jen Broer to Errol Adams, and we had Zach Weiss on from Warner Wound, and William Messina, and so forth and so on. So we had some really, really great guests. So what would have been some of the most memorable or surprising moments on your show since you've started? What's one show that if someone walked up to you and you told them you had a podcast, you'd say, listen to this episode, this is the one that I'm most proud of?
Proud of it, crikey.
Don't whip out and say all of them.
No, yeah. I love it. Frankly, it's all perfect. It is basically the archetypal podcast. You can't do any better than Form and Function, so you should just end it there. But, yeah.
It's in the name. It's all form, all function.
It is. Yeah. I'm just quickly, just in case your listeners aren't aware, I'm British, and sarcasm is a big part of my daily repertoire. You guys can see me. That is the biggest fun. That's a challenge of running a podcast when a lot of our listeners, probably the same for you, are from the US. The sarcasm thing takes time to realize that he's joking, and that's taken a moment. And I think even We've even had some guests. We had a wonderful guest chap called in the EC space and the bag space chap called Bo is Mono, who's just a wonderful human being. And fun enough, one of the episodes, he's done 2 episodes with us now, but one of his episode is still one where I have the biggest kind of warm feeling about right at the beginning, because it kind of, I followed him for so long on YouTube and on Instagram, and just his kind of content production process, and he's very open. He does vlogs and all that sort of stuff, and he's just a wonderful human being. And it was being able to get to know someone and for them to become a friend through something as bizarre as doing a podcast related to it has been wonderful. I think that's proud, perhaps not, but the one that gives me the warm glow is a podcast as a way to make friends. I know that sounds strange, but make friends all over the world. Bo lives in Germany, so we're not likely to bump into each other, but nonetheless, it just having an opportunity just to chat to someone about stuff you love, you collectively love, and discovering the things that they love, and discovering the new stuff, and discovering the different ways of looking at it. The kind of the German mentality is clearly different to a British mentality, and seeing that outlook on the world and these sort of things is fascinating. That I think somewhere in my waffle there was an answer.
That was great.
You've talked already on the show about your love of TGN, and the three of us are huge fans as well. And, James Stacey, the fact that he's a Canadian, I think plays into that a little bit. But even if we hadn't heard from you at all today about your love for TGN, I just going through, your Instagram post, you can see the little stickers that pop up in a photo here and there. And of course it comes up in your conversations with Ken from time to time as well. But the one thing that really is telling for me that you are an avid listener is that sometimes you set your bezel with the pip at 8. And I know immediately when I see that, that's a guy who really listens. He's a deep listener of TGN. So I'm curious, you must listen to other podcasts. What else do you listen to frequently? And what is it about those podcasts that attracts you? Because I know that when you are a podcaster, you start to look at podcasts differently. It isn't just necessarily about the content, but how they're doing it. So what do you listen to, and why do you listen to it?
I feel like I'm blowing a lot of smoke their way, but the Warner Round podcast, I love what those guys do. I love, they have their Changing Gears podcast, with kind of Cat at the helm, and with Garrett involved with that. And frankly, they could get on and just chat about stuff. They do ones with films and that sort of thing. I love all the stuff they put out. I think they have a wonderful way of, despite being, Warner Round is no doubt one of the kind of pinnacle watch publications, but they still manage to sound grounded, down to earth, and just like a bunch of nerds chatting about stuff. And I think that's a wonderful skill. I'd say the very first watch podcast, and the one that I took, probably the other one that I took inspiration from is 40 and 20. You know that one? Those guys, they realizing that you can have a bunch of nerds just chatting about stuff, and it can wander off onto bizarre other topics, and people will listen to that, was part of what kind of that, and TGN probably, there's a listenership out there for the kind of waffle we produce, and I take it also. I locked down. My little boy is 4 now, and when he was very young, he wasn't especially well. So we had to hold him up a lot. And I used to strap him on my front and go for a walk. I'd walk for like hours just with him strapped on. And basically I having found this 1420 podcast, they've been going now for maybe years or so. I had a huge back catalog to listen to. And it was like having, friends in your ear, and having that, just these guys chatting about stuff, and watches. They're very watch focused in the sense of talking about new releases and stuff, but it's just the way they do it. It's a bunch of buddies talking. That's the podcast. And if I meet other watch enthusiasts, and specifically, they say, what other podcast should I listen to? I'm afraid that's the one that I will push people to, because it's the one that most speaks to the sort of the waffle in my head. That makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I'm also realizing that I'm terrible at answering questions.
No, you're not.
The
This has
keeping
been
it
good.
specific. My brain, this is a listeners of my own podcast will know that my brain tends to wander about all sorts of subjects. I'm sure there's something. My two gerbils tend to get confused with each other and go on different tangents.
Our listeners are here for the waffle. No problem at all.
That's it.
How did watches become part of your gear interest? Was there a specific moment or a watch that hooked you?
I very much so. The funny thing is, despite my my public EDC persona being 12 plus years old, um, my watch love is older. Funny enough, I've been into watches. I've had watches probably all of my like waking life as such. I think one of my first watches, I would say a proper watch, was a Timex Expedition. With and it had like an internal rotating bezel, and it had Indiglo, and it was just one of those watches that was just hugely interesting to a little nerd, and that that started. But I didn't really understand, frankly. We're talking about pre-internet, really pre-functional internet from a community point of view, and that I wore that for a long time, and then I think when I was 17, I was given as a gift by my grandmother, with my parents in cahoots, a Omega Seamaster, the little blue one in the 36 mil one, and that would have been probably in maybe 1999, I'd say, and that opened up a whole new watches can be this. This is okay. This is another thing. And it was, it's not swanky by modern standards, but I still have, and I still wear that watch regularly. I wore that on my wrist for, I think, probably 8 years with nothing else, as in that was my daily watch every day on the bracelet. I even had to have the bracelet clasp repaired multiple times over that time. I never got it serviced. Other than that, it was just getting the clasp fixed. And then I think I discovered, I think it was in the UK, we had a forum here called I think it's TZ UK, Time Zone UK. I think I discovered that randomly on
Yeah, Eddie Platz's
yeah.
forum.
And
Time
I
Factors.
discovered Time Factors, that's it. Discovered that, and I think that opened me up to, I lurked on there for years and absorbed.
Yeah, then you probably read a lot of stuff that I posted because I was on there a lot
Right, okay.
back in the day. Yeah.
And that got me down the kind of exploring what else was out there. And I was, by this time, I'd moved to London as a sort of in my early 20s, and I'd finished university, moved to London, and London was a wealth of like flea markets and vintage markets and that sort of stuff. And I think my father isn't into watches, not even a little bit. But when he was about 17, he was given an Omega Seamaster as well. Obviously, it's a very different one to mine. It doesn't look like a dive watch at all. My father was born in the 40s, so that probably gives you an idea of how when he was given it in the 60s. It's that classic 60s three-hander Seamaster. And I spent probably a year in London just looking at lots of different versions of this. And eventually I found one.
And there are a lot of them.
There are a lot of them. But I was after, my father's one is gold. And I have no interest in a gold watch. And I will eventually get that one. So you don't need to. But I eventually found a steel version, basically. And that opened up suddenly wearing two watches rather than just one. They were both Omegas, but purely by chance. Suddenly wearing two watches opened me up to more. And then there were I think I tried an SKX. I tried the 007, but hated it. Swapped it for a 013 because of sizing. And then the rot set in, and the kind of I went through the whole process of Speedmasters and subs and the whole lot, kind of over the next 10 plus years, and then with COVID, and the various lockdowns and the kind of explosion of the watch world, I think that's when the kind of red bar stuff kicked into my life, and seeing more people in person. It wasn't just something that I was into and hunted. I'll be honest, I wasn't a big fan of the forums, and still aren't, in the sense of they weren't always friendly. to people who
Yeah, it's not
didn't
what
know
it
what
used
they
to
were
be.
doing. And I think that kind of, that put me off that side of it. But then, and so I was happy to just kind of lurk it when I needed to. And, the Rolex forums was particularly vile, frankly, at
Yeah,
times.
still is.
Is it? Okay. Can't say fun enough that I was asked this by another watch buddy about TGN. He sort of dabbles with TGN, and he said, "Is it worth subscribing to get onto the Slack?" And the question I asked him was, "How do you feel about the forums in general? Like for anything you're into, are you okay with forums?" And his answer was, "No, he hates them." And I said, "Well, then maybe the Slack might not be for you, because it does have it's like a forum 2.0, if you see what I mean. Kind
Yeah,
of like
in real time, fast.
yeah,
Yeah,
but one that you kind of choose the audience. So they've in a sense the barrier to entry is higher, not monetarily, but just from the point of view of interest, and therefore it is a comparatively lovely place to be, and a positive place to be, which I didn't find my experience at the forums. But yeah, again, I've managed to deviate. I'm sure there was.
it's all good. You mentioned real quick, Roby. I'm gonna pop in here. You mentioned the Indiglo. I remember when I was a little kid, one of my first presents from my parents was a Timex not triathlon, marathon, because there was a marathon watch before it became the triathlon, and it had an incandescent little itty bitty bulb in the dial that lit up a corner of the dial, and if you were lucky, you got to see the other end of the dial. Right when Indigo came out, it was probably on the triathlon or some other watch or expedition or something. I remember clearly being so ecstatic about having a watch that lit up properly and head under the covers with the pushing the
Yeah.
button in, and yeah, it was such a cool invention. Yeah, yes, that was fun.
Do you still have yours?
No, no, that watch got destroyed, and I back then I would wear them until they were unwearable or broken, or I was a pretty rough and tumble kid.
It makes me blush now, but I stopped wearing the Expedition because the strap broke.
Mm.
And I'm embarrassed to say that at the time, that was kind of like, oh, well, the watch is dead then. The strap's got this. Obviously, that's
Well,
just a ridiculous thing. But as I can't remember how old I must have been, maybe like 13, something like that, 14 maybe. And I was just like, oh, okay, so I need a new watch. This is my mindset.
Yeah, you know what? If you can't just go to the store and buy a replacement strap for a triathlon, there are other replacement straps, but they all look like crap on those watches. It has to be the OEM, and when you're a little kid, you're not going to go to a jewelry store, no Walmart back then, and walk up and say, can you order?" So yeah, next.
well,
Yeah.
my father-in-law, he wears a Timex as well, and it's the Timex Expedition, and he's had it for years. I mean, many, many, many years. He's not a watch guy whatsoever. That's just what he wears. It's got paint splatters on it and all kinds of stuff. And then one day, the strap broke, and he was heartbroken. Like, this is terrible. The strap is broken, and I thought that's such a strange thing. So because of this paint splatters and everything, my wife and I, for his birthday, bought him a brand new Timex, beautiful, Timex, and the moment he opened it up, he said, "Oh, I could swap the strap," and that's what he did. He doesn't even wear the new one. He just put the strap over onto the old Expedition.
That's
But
awesome.
One-
James, we could piece together kind of your collection, because you have that sort of public persona on Instagram, and of course you do a lot of wrist checks, of course, and in the podcast and things. And a lot of your stuff is, the stereotypical EDC choices. You can see Hamilton's in there, RZE. I think there was a Timor I saw in one of those things, but you also have some pretty interesting pieces like that Blancpain Air Command and a Hoyer that I saw that I think is really, really beautiful. I'm just curious, do you have a particular, I mean, I obviously didn't start this way, but do you have a collecting philosophy now, or do you still follow your nose?
Yes. Um, it's a big old topic, isn't it? I do and I don't. I'm one of those people that I firmly believe that you should have strong opinions until you don't. And I think that kind of, as in you should believe in something strongly, and then you hear something different and you're like, oh, okay, that changes. And just be like, just fluid with that sort of stuff. And I think that a lot of the watch stuff is like that. So I have very strong opinions. I have very, I like the sizing is a big thing for me. I'm not a huge person. I have 6.5-inch wrists, so not huge. I mean, sorry, not tiny, but not huge either. And that has been a driving factor in my watch choices. And then I have a preference for them to look small as well as to wear So
Okay.
that perhaps is the driving factor. But the number of watches that I've discounted on specs and then worn and been like, okay, and kind of I'd say maybe like 10 plus years of buying and selling a lot of watches has got me to the point I am now. But I still love the fact that you're completely surprised by watches today and
Mhm.
the shape and size and the things that you would absolutely discount uh, on paper, in person, you love. And I think
Okay.
that's the fact that I'm this deep. I've been doing it for a long time, I guess, or into watches for a long time. Yet that's still, and I have a podcast. I guess another thing, which means I think about it a lot,
Mm.
but I still get surprised by things. I mean, your Precidus, that's a great example. Ken has a Precidus, and those watches are insane. But if you were to just say jump on site and you're kind of, it seems relatively, let's say, generic.
Yeah.
There's kind of like there's not much.
Mhm.
If you have access to the worlds of Blancpain and Patek Philippe and that sort of stuff, well then why would you still look at something like Prestus? That's that's a mindset that I think a lot of watch people, perhaps not watch enthusiasts, but watch people adjacent have.
Mm.
And I think the joy has been discovering that that's complete and utter leap. And the real knowledge is knowing that anything, you can love anything, and it doesn't matter how much it is or whatever. And something those guys at Prestus do a fantastic job
Mhm.
of just giving them that little spark. They're watches that are often aping existing watches. They're aping kind of previous watches from history and that sort of stuff, but they
Mhm.
still manage to have a little sprinkling of something. And I think Ken has I think it's a Mac v Sog
Okay.
kind of reissue type. And I think that sometimes those sort of watches lean too heavily for me. It's a bit too sort of cosplay,
Mhm.
but not at all in regards to Prestus. I think they do such a good job. I didn't know they had a 34 mil, I'd say.
Well, now you do.
That
I didn't either.
perks my interest, yeah.
So I'm curious then too, given your kind of participation in the EDC space, people might sort of look at that and say, well, this guy's going to own this type of watch. So what would you say would be the most unlikely watch that you own that people would not really say, hey, I bet you that James owns that?
I think I have, and I can hear a lot of my kind of watch friends laughing at that question. I have quite a broad collection. The ones that I perhaps photograph probably fall a bit closer to that sort of EDC style or sort of TGN side maybe, and those get a lot of wear. But I think I mean a vintage Omega. I have a little Nomos, the kind of the dressier stuff perhaps. I still have my old Timex Expedition, but that doesn't necessarily get worn much. Um, I've got a Ming, I guess that the little
Wow.
titanium
Okay.
Ming. The Ming Ghost that came out last year. That fun enough, I wear that on an isotope strap.
Oh, interesting.
Which
You
those
just earned yourself $20. Do you know?
um, quite genuinely.
That's like £5. Not worth much.
Mark pays us $20 US per isotope mention, just so you know.
Does he?
So yes.
Me. Why?
You have a little
in-
cash coming your way.
In which case, you owe the Form and Function podcast a fair few dollars, I think, because
No, it's only £5 per, so it's not.
Okay.
It's not.
I met at the Birmingham, the Watch It show in Birmingham. I met Jose and is it Joanna? I think is his
Yeah,
wife.
yeah.
I
Joanna's
met
wife.
Joanna
Mhm.
and we started chatting, and I'd seen their straps, and remarkably, there aren't that many straps out there, rubber straps out there that have a good taper, have a really quite noticeable taper on there. And there is some sort of generic AliExpress stuff out there, but frankly, it's horrible, and no one should buy that stuff. But I saw their straps on some of the watches they had on display, and was like, "Do you sell these separately?" And I just got the Ming Ghost, and I think I had it on. The strap it came on is beautifully made. I think it's Jean Rousseau, so it's the stunning strap, but just not my jam. And this watch, very modern style watch with very little going on, was crying out for something modern, like a rubber strap. And that isotope strap is so good. It's I mean, genuinely, like it is the nicest rubber strap that I have ever seen. And I think I think at the time I bought an orange one and a grey one from them. They were very good to sell them separately, but so I wear that on the Ming. That lives on the Ming. What other ones? I have two Corona Tokyos. I guess we know one I'm wearing today. Those are probably not necessarily kind of EDC adjacent, particularly. There's always a challenge. People ask you about your collection. You realize it's too big when you're struggling to remember them.
Corona Tokyo in Japan is an EDC brand over there.
Okay, I suppose.
I'm kidding. I have no idea.
Well, no, fun enough. You've kind of this watch, the brand that I've forgotten his name now, but the guy behind Corona Tokyo, is it Hajime something? I might have got that wrong.
That sounds
I
right.
probably butchered something, but he describes this watch as the kind of go, the Gada. This is his version of a Gada watch, and I mean, no, it ain't that. I think sort of 50 meters water resistance, and it's tough, but it's got so many polished surfaces and things that it just it would be upsetting to wear this.
It's too pretty.
Yeah, it's too pretty. I mean, I think even with the kind of olivey dial, and I've got it on a sort of tan strap, which it all sort of mutes it down a little bit. It's a great watch, but it's not a EDC watch, perhaps in the traditional term of EDC. There is that funny thing, isn't there? The EDC, and this EDC is often viewed as being more kind of sort of rough and tough, rugged in lots of ways. I think there's been a shift in the last few years. Certainly, if you look at the YouTube content relation to EDC, the fact that it's just everyday carry seems to have had a great effect at spreading the net wider. So you get EDC videos from sort of not like gear related people talking about the headphones they carry and the wallets they carry and the bags they're in and the kind of the jumper they always have with them, that sort of stuff, because that's always been my view of EDC. That's always been how I see it. It's only really the kind of the Instagram persona that I've had to take on, and I will say it, but back in the day there was the chasing of follows and likes and all that sort of stuff. The games you had to play in the old days. You still have to play them now. I just choose not to. I just can't. I can't make sense of it now. So I've rather given up. You just post what you like. But I think the EDC is a funny phrase. It means something slightly different to different people. And I think from a podcast point of view, from our Form Function podcast view, that's rather opened it nicely to bring in all sorts of other topics that on a sort of watch only podcast don't get talked about. And indeed, we talked about guests in the earlier in the episode, getting guests to talk about things beyond their watches. Ken and I love watches. We talk about just watches all the time, no trouble. But bringing in all these periphery things, talking about maybe just related stuff, so straps, and watch boxes, and that sort of stuff, and then looking at clothes and just other related stuff has been great. Other stuff that is probably EDC for a lot of people.
So when it comes to the collection, is there anything missing? Anything on the list you're after, or?
So Ken is currently in Japan at the moment, or maybe on his way back from Japan as we're recording this, and he has picked up one of the watches I had on my shopping list for 2026 with the Seiko Rotocool. Come across that? Which is a quirky little Seiko that has it's a digital watch that in the sort of Casio vein, but it has a rotating bezel that you control which function you're using by rotating the bezel. And
is that the new one? They just re-released that, I think.
Yeah.
Did they not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it's a reissue. Would I be wrong in saying maybe from the 70s?
Something like that.
maybe
Yeah.
80s?
Early 80s, maybe?
Is it 80s? Okay. And it's it's not something that had been on my radar until last year when it came out. And they did a limited edition, I think, as well, with a sort of Japanese limited edition. And it's such a weird watch. It's also smaller. Casios are watches that, other than the sort of classic F91 type things, most of them wear too big for my preference, the sort of G-Shock stuff, so I love it, but it just hasn't worked for me. And this perhaps falls into that space. And it has a rotating bezel. So it's fun.
Yeah, that rotating bezel action. There was a Samsung smartwatch that had a bezel that rotated through all the functions. We as watch collectors, we spend all our time making sure our crystals are free from fingerprints and dust and whatever else. And smartwatches go, "Hey, touch me in the face," and pisses me off. And so these guys had this rotating bezel to toggle through all the functions, which I thought was really brilliant. And it had buttons on the side too, so
Yeah.
you basically didn't need to touch the screen.
It's a fun idea.
That's really cool.
And in the world of Seiko, where we as a community, we love to complain about Seiko getting more expensive and offering less and all that sort of stuff. They're still bringing out watches at the more affordable end of their spectrum that are fun and quirky. And you can imagine for people new to the hobby, they've got these. The Gene Kranz is another great example. I don't know if you've handled that in person, but good God, how is that? I've got a friend who lives in Bath, and he picked one up for sort of 240 of the Great British pounds. And oh my God, that's an insane watch for 240 pounds. That's, I think I bought my SKX 013 for 80 pounds back in the day. So, we're not quite in that spectrum, but it's not bad. And in the scheme of that, everything's got more expensive. 240 pounds or 300 odd pounds is for a watch like that, is with all that history and, engagement. And so for new Seiko enthusiasts, there are still watches out there. And the Rotor,
Absolutely.
another good one.
My son's best friend was over the other day, and he had just come back from a trip from Japan, and he knows I'm into watches, so he's really happy to come and show me that he had bought himself the Seiko GMT with the purple on the bottom and black on the top bezel, and he was so proud of it. Good for him. That's a great watch for a young man.
Yeah.
A great watch for anybody, for that matter.
While we're talking about watch prices or, value propositions, I want to maybe go to the further end of that scale. I noticed in one of your posts that you had a Rolex Explorer. Do you still have that watch?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I could probably ask you the same question about your Blancpain, but when you have a watch that's that price, and you're in the EDC space, and on like these watches, they're supposed to be Gata watches. Do you treat it like a Gata watch? Do you wear it on in any occasion, or is it something that you, because of its price tag, you treat a little more with kid gloves?
My gut reaction to a question like that would be, oh no, of course I treat all my watches the same, and that's kind of how I go into it as a mentality. That's how I 90% of the time, that's how I will treat it. But you're not human if you're wearing a Blancpain and you don't think twice. There's that kind of like, the fact is it costs a disgusting amount of money for for a watch on anyone's spectrum, frankly. And it's in there, isn't it? It's in your head. You're gonna remember that. So I think most of my watches I will wear in any scenario. There are some, that Blancpain is silly in so many ways. It looks like a tool watch, and it's made of grade 23 titanium and all that sort of stuff, but it has 30 meters water resistance, and that hurts. Not because it's probably not fine for everything I do, because we're so used to we're used to 200, 300, and it's a Blancpain. Like divers watches, come on.
Yeah, God forbid you fall in the Thames.
Yeah, exactly. That's, you're long gone. But I don't know. I kind of, that's probably the exception. That's the one I think about because it has a spec on it that implies it has a weakness. But in regards to its value, I wear that in the same places that I wear. I've got a number of Tudors and Rolexes, and I've thinned out the probably, I hate to use the word hype, but the hypier watches, the watches that are likely to be more obviously picked up. If you're on the streets in London and you're wearing a sub, well, you're not. It's just, nothing's going to happen probably, but it's the probably that sticks. And so wear something else. Collection, I don't need to wear it. And that just meant I've stopped. I lived in London for 12 plus years, and during that time I had the sub and those sort of things. Back then, perhaps I didn't even think about it. But with everything that's happened now, I kind of it crosses my mind. So when I go to London, do I still only? I probably wouldn't wear the Explorer. even in London, funny enough. That's thinking about it now, that's the defining factor. It's not so much the value or would I break it. It's more a question of like, is it drawing attention to me in some shape or form? And the Explorer, it isn't a particularly ostentatious watch, but it's got a bracelet on it, and that makes it instantly more visible compared to most of my watches that I wear on straps. So I tend to, I have some favorites for London actually. My little Longines Legend Diver 36 mil. That is my absolute favorite kind of London watch, because it's a watch that I get all the kicks I need from a watch from it, but it has no, if someone steals that, well then, good on them. It's not a great loss. Well, it is a great loss. Obviously, I've had it since, for quite a long time, but it's not a financial loss, and no one's going to chop my arm off for it because they're not going to know what it is. What's that weird little thing? But
yeah, it's interesting because in asking you that question, I was definitely thinking more about, are you afraid of damaging it? And then that naturally migrated towards this idea of the watch being taken. And I maybe I'll just step in here and ask this other question, even to you two guys. Is there anywhere in Canada you wouldn't wear any particular watch? Because I get this about London, and we've even seen Andrew McCutcheon posted a video shortly after being on our podcast about where he was literally sized up on the tube and had a close call. So, but I don't know that there is a place in Canada where I wouldn't wear absolutely anything, which is but that could also be because the average person in Canada is not really a watch nut and might not recognize those things. But what do you guys think?
I'm not worried about anywhere in Canada. When I went to Greece a couple of years ago with my Grand Seiko, I was a little worried in some places, but again, there was nothing to worry about. No, nowhere in Canada, that's for sure.
I wouldn't be worried about anywhere that I'm going, but there is definitely like parts of some of the Canadian cities that would be, it could be an issue. There's areas in Toronto that are would be a little bit riskier than others.
Maybe I'll have to be a little bit more careful next time I go to Toronto. But it is a sad development. It is a sad development to say that would actually be the one thing that would stop you from wearing it. That's unfortunate.
It's hard sometimes to get away from the kind of the little thing that digs away into your brain. The logical part of your brain says it's just not a thing. Statistically, it's just not a thing. London has 10 plus million people in Greater London, and proportionally for there to be a watch theft a day is still about right on the statistics, and that's out of 10 million people. That's a very low chance of being kind of picked up. And God bless him, Andrew McCutcheon. He's a fantastic fellow, and he's doing a wonderful job for the watch community. But he's looking for clicks with that type of content. Huge pinch of salt. London is not a dangerous place. I know it's very high. It's silly that I'm saying that, given what I kind of led with, but it's not really. We need to get out of this sort of mindset where we sort of sit in a small room and yell at each other, tell stories, and therefore we all develop these mindsets. And I think it's important that just wear your watches, insure them, and then wear your watches, I guess, is the way of looking at it. And the simple thing that I think actually Andrew said in some of his shorts, give them the watch. If someone you're somewhere dangerous and someone you've been silly enough to be somewhere dangerous with a watch that they want, give them the watch. It's a watch. It sounds really obvious, but you may be a black belt martial artist, but give them the watch. It's not worth it.
For sure.
Watch. And
what solve all those problems is if you give the police guns instead of those little batons and whistles and those funny hats. It solves your problems right there.
There's the whole conversation, isn't it? Yeah. I feel like we're in a safe space with British and Canadians. Yeah.
It's the only reason why I brought it up. So with so many voices in the watch world, and everybody seems to have a podcast now, including us. How do you think Form and Function approaches watch culture differently than everyone else?
Probably from the point of view of comparing us to other watch podcasts, probably with a lack of direction. I think is the reality. I think it's the Ken and I are we're both, I think, fairly opinionated human beings, but I think there's an element of humility where you don't know everything. You can have opinions, but they're opinions, and I think that hopefully that permeates everything. That kind of we'll say we hate something, but if so, it's a soft thing. It's never like opinions should never be vitriolic. There should never be things. It's difficult. We're enthusiasts. You get enthusiastic, and myself particularly, I get worked up in the expression of it all, in the acting of it all, of just expressing an emotion. But then you realize that actually it doesn't matter, and I think there are lots of other podcasts out there that are doing, first of all, a much better job of giving information, of an actual tool that you can take to help your decision with choosing watches or that sort of thing. But yeah, Form Function is not one of them.
Yeah, I did disagree with you as far as opinions are concerned. NATO straps suck. They
Oh,
shouldn't be
yes,
on watches.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I will die on that hill.
Yeah, team no NATO. Actually, no, hang on, that's a different thing altogether.
Yeah,
That's a very topical thing too, isn't it? Oof.
it is. Can't we even call them NATOs anymore? No, that's a
yeah.
different story
We
altogether.
probably have to pay some kind of fee for that, but yes.
Yeah.
No, we're in Canada. We can't get sued by American, or can we? I don't know. So what's an EDC piece that you've underestimated at first, and now you cannot leave your home without it? Is it that pen that you were talking about earlier, maybe? Or...
I mean, maybe from a fidget point of view, having something to play with. Yes. I think the only part of my kind of in inverted commas EDC that I absolutely couldn't live without is my phone. Really, as boring an answer as that is, our phone is our true EDC, isn't it? Again, there's a big move to try and cut away from this stuff, and the fact is, it's a tool. Like any tool, choose to use it or don't choose to use it. Same with opinions. That thing of kind of you're the master of your own kind of mental space, and therefore choose not to use it if it's too much. Don't blame the phone for things. But and that's the bit that is glued to my hip. I don't even carry a wallet. You all mentioned wallets. I don't actually carry a wallet anymore. Well, in my bag,
I often forget my wallet.
I don't have it in my pocket ever anymore, which is a weird thing, having grown up with that sort of, you patch your wallet for your, well, more recently phone wallet keys, but it used to just be wallet keys that you were patting for to make sure you had them.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I do feel naked without a watch. I know that's leaning into the kind of cliche, but I think I don't like not having a watch on. I think that experience of having worn them for so long, I feel like I'm not fully dressed. You haven't kind of you haven't put your shoes on or something.
Yeah.
Lucy yesterday, Watchbox Diaries. I don't know if you know Lucy.
Yeah.
She posted on Instagram that she left the house without a watch, and she was embarrassed. Now, I haven't left the house without a watch. I don't think that's ever happened. How can anybody leave the house without a watch on? I mean, I sleep with one on, so I'm starting off the day. It's already there. Like, how can you leave the house without a watch?
Do you have a sleeping watch, or do you sleep with any?
For a time I did. No, for a time I did. When I had that Marathon Navigator with the tritium tubes.
Oh, yes.
It was a quartz watch, and I had it on a fine mesh bracelet. So it's super comfortable, soft, and it's a really thin watch. And for a while, that was my bedtime watch because, 3:00 in the morning, the tritium tubes are bonkers amazing. But that watch is long gone. The Fortis that I wear now, I wear a bed. It's quite the heavy watch to be wearing at night.
I'd be worried about
the
your
loom
wife's
is
health
incredible.
with that thing on your wrist. You turn over
She
the
sleeps
wrong
on my
way.
right. No, she sleeps on my right, so we're good. The watch is on the left, we're good. If I slept on the other side, then yeah, turning around and knocking her out.
And if
It would
you
be,
ever wake up
bad.
to an intruder or something, you can just thump with that.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Knuckle dust. Yeah.
Yeah, that watch is such a beast. It's unbelievable.
So for anybody that's new to the whole EDC thing, do you have a recommendation for the listeners? Maybe a knife, flashlight, pen trio that doesn't break the bank, something
Sorry,
affordable?
back. I think one of the ones that I think I started with was I'll be boring and say a Victorinox penknife of some type. You can pick up a simple one. I mean, my favorite being probably the Alox scaled classic cadet,
Mhm.
which is a very simple. It basically has a blade and a bottle opener and possibly a flathead screwdriver in 2 sizes, that kind of thing. Very simple, very unassuming, and 35 pounds, or probably about maybe 50 Canadian, something like that, maybe.
Something like that.
Give or take. A Fisher Space Pen. It's one of the old school kind of OG EDC items. They're still popular today because they're brilliant. It's a tiny little thing with a really cool history, and however much of it is hyperbole, it's still a cool thing and history. And they come in lots of different versions. So one for a color for everybody type thing, or a material finish for everybody. And then flashlights is a bit more difficult because technology has changed a lot in the time that I've been seeing. The flashlights are better today. The battery technology has changed, has improved. But on a very basic point of view, something like a Lumen Top AA or AAA is like a classic entry level. I say entry, I don't mean that in any way to be kind of negative about it, but it's an affordable thing. You can pick them up for maybe 15, 20 pounds for an aluminium one, and it will take AAAs or AAs depending on the size one you go for. And frankly,
Sorry, James. Sorry, it's aluminum.
I thought this was a safe space. What's going on?
It's all good.
Yeah. What did I say? I said aluminium, didn't I? Yeah. I'll die on that. I'll die on that hill. It's all good. Yeah, I think that would be my 3 that I would recommend. And I think maybe you could pick up the 3 of them probably for 60, 70 pounds. And frankly, you'd probably never need anything else. But of course you would need all the other stuff and everything else, obviously. I need everything I've got around me, obviously. But
What's this word need anyway?
the dirty word, yeah.
Now you have a lot of other interests that are outside watches and EDC, and one of which is very clearly your photography. Your IG posts, the compositions are very thoughtful. I'm curious, like, what does your photography gear look like, and is there something else you like to shoot?
Yes. It's a thorny topic for me of sorts. Because I'm lazy as hell, and I have to spend too much time editing a podcast, and therefore time for editing photographs is something I haven't yet really mastered, and therefore don't often do. So most of my posts are pretty much straight out of camera, from a lazy point of view. And I think it's always been a limiting factor. It's that the fact is editing is an important part of making, photographs that weren't in the perfect scenario look better, especially if you're trying to sell something. The fact that it's just been hobby for me has meant I haven't had to do that. And therefore my cameras change all the time.
Okay.
I'm not having to deal with editing profiles and that sort of stuff from all the varying things. I was talking to a friend who is a professional photographer about this. And one thing that doesn't get talked about is the fact that there's people who love photography, and then there's people who love photography gear. And I think I'm both, but the photography gear is a definite thing for me too. I love the machines, the objects, the beauty in those in their own right, as well as the fact that they're fantastic tools for taking photographs. I think that's something that doesn't really get talked about that much. There's a lot of negativity about people buying, or you're buying just the next camera, you're buying just another camera. That's, but if that person, like me, for example, just loves the gear, and I'm on that constant hunt for my perfect camera. Of course, photography is relevant for that, but a lot of it is how it feels. How does it make you feel? How How do you want to, does it make you want to pick it up? All that kind of stuff. And for me, that's object. It's, I'm lucky enough that probably my main shooter these days is a Leica Q3 43,
Okay.
which isn't, from the point of view of posting straight from camera onto Instagram. That's a lovely place to start from, because it's got all the detail in the shots, and frankly, it does a good job of making up for my lack of knowledge, really. But and fun enough, the other camera I use at the moment is a Fuji XE5, so the latest one of those.
You just made Brent very happy.
You're a Fuji man, aren't you?
Fuji, yeah. But I completely understand when you say about just loving the gear, and I don't even view it as sort of chasing the next best thing, because like I shoot normally with an XT5 or the XT2, which is the older version. But one of the things that I've been just hankering to pick up, it's similar to the one you just mentioned, is like the X Pro, even just an X Pro 1 or 2, just the look of them and the solidity, the way they're built, and there's. If you're going to do professional work for somebody, maybe you do want 40 megapixel sensor. But if you're just going to take beautiful pictures, you can get away with a 16 megapixel sensor. So like, there's a lot of stuff there. Like if when I'm not on Instagram, I'm sometimes on Pinterest, and I'm looking at what people would call camera porn, like just the beautiful picture of a great camera, so yeah, I completely get that.
And obviously that picture was taken without that camera. It was taken by probably a cell phone, and it looked pretty good, didn't it?
That's the funny thing, isn't it? All these pictures, Leicas and stuff, you're kind of like, well, but what were you taking that on?
Yeah,
for sure.
I have to say, I'm a big Fuji fan too. I think so my start in digital photography was I think in about 2012. They Olympus, back kind of RIP, released the OMD. I think the OMD EM5, and micro four thirds sensor, 16 megapixels, and that was just such a wonderful camera to use. It just, the pictures that came out of it, combined with some of the lenses available on the micro four thirds system. They have a little 20 mil, I think, it might be a Panasonic lens. That just the combo of those was just beautiful. It made you want to take photographs. And it was a bit janky and the kind of the hunting of the lens and stuff. But once you got used to that, and you got used to the fact that it's the kind of the crop of a micro four thirds lens, and I learnt on 35 mil kind of real film as such, and therefore just mentally making sense of that. But once I'd got past that, the joy of being able to see what you've taken, and that sounds silly, probably speaks to how old I am, but that joy was a new love of it brought in a whole new thing of technology to me. The cameras were now this thing, and I've had a bit like watches. My camera journey is long and kind of rambling. But the one thing that has always stayed, I've always had at any one moment, is either an Olympus camera or a Fuji camera, because of my allergy to editing. JPEGs coming out of Olympus and coming out of Fuji are unbeatable. The colors and the just whatever it is about those, the color sciences that they chose to use, just have always appealed to me hugely. And then Olympus and micro four thirds perhaps has past its thing, not completely. It still has a place, and the OM3, I think they brought out recently, is a lovely camera to use. But the Fuji stuff, yeah, I always like to have. But yeah, I'm a big Fuji fanboy too. So despite when I got the Leica, the assumption was the Fuji would go, but it hasn't.
It's a vicious rabbit hole, the whole photography thing, that's for sure. I consume more photography. I'm into videography too, and I consume more on that subject than I do watches, to be honest with you, right at the moment. I was actually just
You just lost some watch
yeah,
cred.
I know. I'm making the shift over to Fuji from Canon, actually, this year is the plan. But now Nikon has just come out with the ZR. I think it's the ZR that is a really nice camera too. It's a vicious rabbit hole, but I love your minimalist style of photography. It's clean, no nonsense. very organized. Brent and I discuss our photography together, and we work similarly in that we have multiple photography projects going on at the same time. I was wondering if you turn that camera around, is it a disaster in the background, or is it as clean as your photos?
I do I break the mystery? It's yeah. I'm relatively organized. I guess I'm from. My father was a soldier. I grew up on military bases and organization. Being moving every few years. So I'm quite an organized person. I like things to be in their place a little bit. But if you could see the desk behind this laptop, then you wouldn't believe that was the case. Although everything has its place. I think I work on the idea that I have in my office, I have 3 different desks. I have a desk that I photograph on, which is completely clear. I have my work desk, which has a computer and 2 monitors on. And then I have my kind of recording and kind of toy desk, should we say. I mean, that's the way of putting it. And that has, watches and flashlights and knives and silly tools and bits and pieces all over it. And those, every month I will line it all up neatly. But as I mess about with it, as I sit here on a podcast, I've tried not to today, but I'll click and flick and pick up a bit, start playing with that, and it gradually works its way into chaos. But yeah, the bit behind.
As the one who edits this podcast, I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, I've had to edit my own clicks out enough to realize it is very. That's why that click pen. It's not. Yeah, it's not a podcaster. But.
Well, as Bob intimated a second ago, we talk about the fact that our places are pretty cluttered, and people say sometimes they'll send you a DM and show us the BTS. What does it look like when you're shooting that? And I'm ashamed. I don't want to show that. In fact, I'm not sure brands would send me watches anymore if they saw the chaos that was sprawling out around those shots. But yeah.
So, James, do you ever notice a difference between how you talk about gear on Instagram versus how you talk about gear on podcast, or is it the same?
Good question. I hadn't thought about it. I like to think that I'm always me when I'm talking about stuff. There's always a little bit of performative to Instagram, should we say? You're playing a role. There's the idea that you lay out like 10 items of EDC in inverted commas. Those are clearly not. I may not even be carrying those things at all that day. I will have a knife on me. I will have a flashlight on me. I will have an equivalent sort of basics. They may be in my bag. They may not be in my pockets. They may be on the desk next to me, that kind of thing. But that isn't what Instagram wants. The God bless it. There are some interesting souls out there who love to comment, and there's the section of the EDC world that is, I think it's sort of the use your shit, if it's okay to use that word in this context.
Yeah, it's fine.
Kind of brigade can be quite militant about it. And that thing of like, oh, that knife looks really new. And I think that once upon a time, I would defend that position as if like, well, yes, but if you own 100 knives, they're all going to look new, aren't they? You can't carry them all. And in the end, I just stopped, and so I try not to be too performative. I try not to kind of, spin too much of a sort of story with it, implying things that aren't true. But you do, yeah, you've got a room full of gear. You kind of want to, you start laying it out, and you start, oh, that would look good in there, or that would be fun in there. And you kind of, it's the art of the photography bit is a big part of it for me now, I guess. Taking the photograph, taking the image that I enjoy. And therefore, that's probably trumped the desire for it to be realistic, should we say? But there's still truth to it. I'm not, none of this stuff is. And one of the things that you often get some angry people about is you get sent stuff for free. Yeah, of course, I get sent stuff for free, but obviously legally you have to mention that's the case. And I have never been sent anything for free that I haven't either thought, well, this is a product that is absolutely me, I'm a big fan of this, or if it's not something that I'm sure about, it's something that I think I'll only post it if it's good. The stuff that's come in, and I've been like, you know what, that's trash. I obviously don't say that to the brand, but I will, I will say I'm not going to post it. And that's, it doesn't always go down well, but it's the reality is I will never post things that I wouldn't support. And that includes stuff I've been sent for free. And I think that's done me well over the years I've been doing it, that people do kind of, the conversations I've had in DMs and stuff, people do kind of trust the fact that I'm not just posting any old junk. It's the stuff that matters to me. And on regards to the podcast, there was a point to my waffle at some point. In regards to the podcast, that is pure truth, as in like there's no affectation there. It is, if I think something's rubbish, I'm going to say it's rubbish, because the listener to that, that podcasting is a very personal thing. You've got a person effectively in your ears of sorts, and I think it's like a one-on-one conversation. And if you can't trust someone in a one-on-one conversation, then especially in our type of podcasts, we're a community thing. So the smoke and mirrors just shouldn't be there. And that's, we try and stick to. Ken's different. Ken's horrendous. He takes stuff for free all the time and just says things all over the place. And I am obviously joking. Say that.
So what's one category of gear you think deserves more spotlight in the EDC watch communities?
Ooh, I would love to see more crossover. I'd love to see more people doing what I do, which is showing more of your other loves together with your watches. I think the watch, frankly, the watch space, present company included especially, is full of, frankly, photographers that are always going to do it better than you anyway, if it's just a watch. But so other angles, like throwing in other gear, throwing in bags. There are some wonderful people on Instagram who, they do these sort of flat lays, and obviously flat lays isn't a new thing, but for EDC gear, sometimes in the old days, they didn't do very well because it's too zoomed out. People can't see the stuff. But if you're including bags and clothing and all that sort of stuff in the same image, with your watch, with your knives, with your whatever, that sort of wider zoomed out picture of what people love, I think would be great. And I think it would be great. I'm looking at probably two of us here, to see more of the gear. You Brent, you mentioned that that pen of yours pops up in the back, and I knew I'd seen it somewhere in the back of your pictures, and I think it would be cool to see more of that. More people are doing it, but it would be cool for that to be the discussion around these other things that we love. More of that would be cool to me.
Yeah. I agree with that. I agree with putting watches with other gear, other stuff to give it proportion and a better aspect. I've also noticed that whenever I post a picture where there's multiple watches together, comparisons, or if I sit one on top of the other or line them up differently, people may have that other watch and are thinking about the other one, and now they see direct comparison as to what they look like next to each other. Those posts usually do very well.
Yeah.
Enough. That's a really good point. Buying, it's an inevitable reality of posting anything, isn't it? That effectively people are shopping on Instagram. They're going through looking at all this stuff, and they're looking for the next thing they want to buy, the next thing they might want to. I think with watches, there's a lot of hero shots out there, but there aren't these ones where you've got and there's a lot of kind of collection shots, but obviously most collectors perhaps don't have, 5 of the things that are very close to each other and next to each other. And that would be cool to see. I think, that would be a good series, to have, the kind of and it's been out there before, but not just a don't buy that, buy this, but, you could buy this or this or this or this or this, but in that very small spectrum where they're quite similar looking, and there's, and this is why for this one, and this is why for this one, and this is why for this one, or this one's for this particular type of nerd, this one's for this particular type of nerd, this kind of, that would be fun. I think having that.
Yeah, last summer I had a Tudor Black Bay Pro GMT, and I have the Grand Seiko SPG 257, which is the smaller green GMT. So both watches are relatively the same thickness, same size, same functions, very different. And next to each other, just shape-wise, the Seiko is actually a little thicker, the Grand Seiko, but because it's so shapely, it fits different, and so it was neat taking those pictures, and people really seem to have
Which
joined
do you
those.
prefer?
I still have the Grand Seiko, don't
Okay.
have the Tudor. And I've had a white one as well afterwards. I don't have that one either anymore.
I find
To be fair, the Grand Seiko was my 50th birthday anniversary for my wife, so
Okay.
it's not going anywhere. It has some crazy sentimental value. So sorry, Brent,
Oh,
I
no
interrupted you.
problem. I just find this part of the conversation very interesting because, when I was asked to do a photography workshop at that Tudor boutique in Toronto a year or so ago, one of the things I did was I went on to Instagram to look at stats and look at what pictures people are interested in. And out of the top 50 images, there were only 2 hero shots. In other words, every other image that was there had something to do with lifestyle, flat lay, usually a hand, a wrist was involved. And so I like what you say, that people are on Instagram and they're shopping, but they're not just shopping for watches, they're shopping for a lifestyle. And so when they see these things together and they see, the carabiner and the knife and that particular watch, that's what triggers that little thing in their limbic system. They're thinking, that's how I see myself, and I find that it's increasingly I realize that about me too. That's what I want to see. I want to see, how does this play out in the real world. So yeah, very interesting. It also shows that we all have a lot of other interests / addictions, and those kinds of things. And I know we talked about your photography, which is one of those, but I also understand you're interested in history. And I find that with many watch enthusiasts, especially those like into military watches, there's a parallel love of history. So I'm just curious, what eras of history interest you most?
So I guess I love knowing stuff. I love information. I love almost about anything. I just you can never have too much information. You can never have too many answers, if you see what I mean. And I think I love that because the more you know, the better you can process information yourself, kind of. And I think history is essentially, I'm a historian by education. So I have a degree. I have a classics degree, so ancient history degree. And I did various other periods kind of in the build up to that. So I love history as an academic exercise and as kind of, as a daily pastime. I live in Bath, which is kind of, I'm surrounded. I mean, from my window now, I'm looking at an abbey, which is maybe like 700 years old. And then I'm looking across to the Roman baths, which are Roman baths. So there you go. And then off in the other direction, I've got Victorian and I've got Georgian, and I'm surrounded by history all the time. It's a joy of living somewhere like this, and a curse at times. But I think, history is such a part of a lot of Brits' lives. I think, we kind of, and lots of my friends don't embrace it. I have done. I don't think that answers your question, but I think that is kind of, yeah.
That will do. That will do.
That'll do. Okay. That'll do, pig.
What's an episode idea you haven't done yet that you're excited to tackle?
I'm not sure I'm telling you that. Crikey. I think
We won't take the idea.
what I would love to do is more kind of mobile recording. So like podcasts, at events for podcasts, at a watch meetup or that kind of thing. I think, there are technical issues around that to a degree. And then there's just professionalism issues. I kind of, I would love to say that I'm 100% proficient on this stuff. I love gear. I love technology. I love the microphones. I love everything about it, but that doesn't mean I'm particularly experienced in it. And therefore the idea of at a high pressure situation, knowing exactly what to do. And it's the same reason why I've not really gone into videography, because it's such a big, section that getting it right is such a deep dive, and such a challenge. And there's so many options within it that I kind of, you pick your battles as such. And I think,
the editor in me just got really nervous when you said doing a podcast in a public location.
But it would be, I think, as long as your listener accepts that, okay, this is a This is a mobile
Yeah.
episode, should we say? Because from a quality point of
Yeah,
view,
yeah, yeah.
I recently bought a set of little portable microphones, DJI Mic 3, I think they're called. And I have to say that has 32-bit float. And as a result, I know it's work in regards to editing, but as a result, there's not too much that can happen that can ruin your recording. And therefore, as long as you are willing to put the time in to kind of fix it if necessary. And I've been practicing on like my friends and family with this stuff. At Christmas, I got my kind of grandparent, my parents and my parents-in-law and family members to read books for my son. So he's got books to listen to, but being read by his family members.
Yeah.
And I, that was the first time I'd kind of used these microphones in anger, and I just clipped it onto them, and then we just literally just started, and the quality is spectacular. I'm sitting here on a microphone that's kind of all professional and that sort of stuff, but frankly, what was coming out of these tiny little microphones was really impressive. And with that 32-bit float, it kind of deals with a lot of the headaches that might come from not getting it. You're not getting the take as such. But I think it would be really fun to do that. I haven't yet worked out quite how I'm going to do it. I went to New York Wind Up last year, and I found myself chickening out, basically.
It's loud in that building too. There's a lot of people. We were right around the corner. You could have come to see us. We were at the Hype around the corner at the Draper Hotel.
Yes. Oh, you were? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing I hadn't realized about everything related to Wind Up New York is the scale. The kind of a lot of people who I'd been in touch with, for years online, where I was meant to meet them there, I met them there, and it's a lot. That kind of like keeping it up with it all, and that's probably why I chickened out, frankly, because there was a point of like, you want to be in the moment.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, you want to be talking to people, and you don't want to be thinking about the technical stuff, which is why practicing is important. To get better at it, know how it works, know how it fails, and then I have a little watch get together, kind of an offshoot of Red Bar Bristol, which is ridiculously called Bath Time, where a bunch of us, and I apologize for that, but it is what it is.
That's fantastic.
Where we meet, and it's a small group of us. There's kind of, and more often than not, there's maybe like, I don't know, sort of 4 to 8 of us, should we say, there. And I think that's the perfect environment to try it. These are all good friends. They're all watch nerds. It's a safe space to try it. But that would be the next bit I want to try for the podcast.
Cool.
In preparation, maybe for Vancouver.
Yeah. I mean, we should do a joint podcast together.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'm up for it.
That could be fun. So how about some rapid fire to finish this off here? So first one, mechanical or quartz, and why? You guys should have seen the face.
I offer defense for both because I love both. I'm gonna say is spring drive mechanical or quartz in this department?
Oh shit!
It's basically spring drive.
It's mechanical.
Would be my choice. If I'm going to choose a movement, I'm going for spring drive. So I
have
mechanical.
to admit that that's a fantastic movement.
I think mechanical probably. More so.
Favorite strap material?
Currently, canvas. RSM straps do a Japanese canvas, like very light, high quality canvas. That is a beautiful strap. Favorite.
I have a bunch of them at home right now, and I have to agree.
I did too.
Straps,
Yeah, I had to too. They're great.
One gear item you think everyone should try at least once?
A gear item. Okay. You know what? I'd say a high-end camera.
Yeah, that's good.
Because I don't think people that aren't into gear you don't really need to faff about with Leicas and stuff. You can spend a fraction of the price and get everything that a Leica can do, but you still need to maybe give it a play. You still need to handle a Hasselblad. You still need to play around with a kind of inexpensive vintage thing. Kind of cameras. I think cameras are something that I think everyone should handle as much as possible.
Now, to finish off, we've got a couple of questions from listeners. And one of them is from Devin C. Goes by @caseback in time on
Oh,
Instagram.
no, 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 no,
He
no,
asked us to ask you, why is it important to place
Evan,
jam
goddamn you.
first, then clotted cream on scones? He said you'd love that question.
It is a very good question. I do love that question. It's first of all, it's not important to put jam first, and that's why he's phrased it that way. You should always put the cream first and then the jam because we're not animals, and why would we ever do it any other way? There is a silly British thing where there's always been this debate, and it's regional probably. Whether you on your scones do you put the cream first or do you put the jam first? And I think I've always treated cream like butter. You'd butter before you put the spread on or whatever, wouldn't you? So yeah, I kind of cream then jam in Devon. Everyone use that.
And lastly, just before we started recording, I got a question from our mutual friend Chris at Popping Crowns. He says, I have a question for James. I love his photos and the aesthetic they capture with all his gear. I want to know, Sir James, do you always carry all that shit in your pockets?
Thank you, young peasant. No, I don't. It's mostly affectation. I do use all the gear. If it's in a photograph, it's stuff that I love and I use, but I don't carry. It might be in my bag, but the problem of Q&As is you get too many sort of people from the cheap seats having a go. So yeah.
So that's it for episode 41. On behalf of the three of us, thank you so much for being our guests on this episode, James. We really appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The Time to Calibrate podcast is out every 2 weeks. Please like, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the show, it would be great if you could recommend it to your family and friends. If you'd like to reach us, our email is timetocalibrate@gmail.com. We welcome comments, suggestions, and questions. Don't be shy. We don't bite. We're Canadian. If we do bite, we'll ask first. Until next time, T2C out.